there. And when I moved here, I knew nothing about the Border Patrol. I'd never heard of it. My husband used to make me hide from the Border Patrol, and I did. That's how naive I was about that. But yeah, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to hide. But so as things progressed over the years, I'm going to try to condense 40 years into just a few minutes. So bear with me. Mark gave me about a minute's notice on this, but I've had a lot of practice over a 40-year time period. We began having problems along the border that I can remember since 1976. Some of you might remember the Hannigan case near Douglas at that time, and you can look it up, I won't go into it, but that was just a lot of ranchers along the border were having problems with vandalism and their water tanks being drained and just break-ins all the time, burglarizing. It was just awful for all of them. But a lot of us had problems on our ranches at that time too. I don't know a rancher along the southern border that hasn't had a burglary, a vandalism, a threat, even up to our friend Rob Prince, who was murdered in 2010. But from 1976 to 1986, we had just a few illegals that would come through from time to time. And they were friendly and they were very respectful. I provided food, I provided water, I provided medical care if they needed it. They usually would spend maybe a night and they would sleep in the barn or somewhere, or under a tree, or just provide them with some shelter, and they would spend the night and move on. Occasionally I'd give them just a little work to do just to get them along their way. In 1986, when Ronald Reagan's Amnesty Act came along, then the hordes of them started coming through. And from 86 to 96, it was absolute hell. We had them every single day. Very, very many of them. Keep in mind, I'm 25 miles north of the border. I live over on Davis Road between Tombstone and McNeil. So 25 miles north of the border, I didn't feel like we should have had hundreds, if not thousands, come through every single day. They would cut fences, they would drain water tanks, they would shut our cattle off water. We had lots of cattle that died just from eating acrylic blankets. They eat plastic bags, anything that the illegals would leave on their way through, the cattle would try to eat, and so we lost a lot of cattle. They would drain water tanks in the month of June and leave them without water. So we had horses and cattle die at that time. So it was just, it was really hell. We had thousands and thousands. We had trash. We have picked up many, many tons of trash on our ranch. Everything from plastic bottles to pregnancy tests to women's feminine products to dirty diapers, you name it, we have picked it up and moved it. And now we learned from the national sheriffs that to be careful about trash on our ranches now, because fentanyl is so deadly that a grain of it could kill you. So they don't want you to pick up and touch any of it. We've had many, many dump trucks full of trash taken off of our ranch over the years. And that's just one ranch. Keep in mind that our ranch has been there for over 100 years. My husband's great-grandfather came to Cochise County in 1862. So we're obviously not newcomers to the border and the border problems. So from 86 to 96, we just dealt with hordes and hordes of them. In 1996, that was about the time that the federal government and the Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, came up with a strategy that we still use today, and it's a failed strategy called Defense in Depth. And in the year 2000, David Aguilar, who was the border Tucson sector chief at the time, and later became the commissioner of the Border Patrol in Washington, D.C., came to my home and sat in my living room, and he also brought with him some, Border Patrol chief from the San Diego sector, I believe. And they wanted to talk to ranchers about their problems along the border, because at that time, our area was the very worst along the 2,000-mile border. So we had ranchers in our living room, and they told us about their defense in depth strategy. And their plan was, and still is, to secure the cities and force the illegal traffic into the rural areas. So that means that I am the first line of defense. And so now you probably feel a whole lot more secure than you did a minute ago, but that's what it did, is the Border Patrol was there to secure the cities, which means the numbers of voters, and force them onto me, who are very few voters. So, needless to say, I'm armed almost all the time. I couldn't go for a walk by myself on my ranch because I was afraid of running into illegals, and I have. It was very common to go into our barn and there would be people asleep on the floor when we go into the barn to feed in the morning. My daughter one time was out riding horseback and she ran into a group of illegals who were coming upon her, and they were being very aggressive, and she, thank goodness, could just get away from them. Her horse was a little faster than they were afoot. My husband had an illegal grab his horse by the bridle reins and try to drag him down. We've been vandalized, just a lot of horrific things that I can think of. In 1996 was defense in depth. See, I didn't have this thing to go by. And then in 2000, we talked to David Aguilar about defense in depth, and then later on, actually in 2016, I was asked by Martha McSally to testify in Congress in front of her subcommittee that she chaired for border and maritime security on the failed policy of defense in depth, because I'd had so many years experience seeing the problems. But a lot of people in the cities particularly, and I know El Paso brags about being safe. Sierra Vista in the city seems pretty safe, Nogales. A lot of the big cities do, and then those of us in the country have to deal with the repercussions of that. So we didn't think it was a very good policy at the time, because even in the rural areas, they were north of me. So most of the agents were not on the international boundary. Their idea was to move inside the United States. They actually called it a corridor between the United States and Mexico. So there's a 25 to 30 to 50 mile corridor that's the cushion, so to speak, between the United States and Mexico, which is where I live and where I pay taxes. And we don't get the kind of security that a lot of the people that even come across the border are getting. Our civil rights, I feel, have been violated because we can't arrest an illegal for trespass. For example, I could arrest that lady back there for trespass on my property and make a citizen's arrest on her, but I can't do that with an illegal because I would be violating their civil rights. So we have been schooled by U.S. attorneys that what we could and could not do. And so we absolutely, the only thing we can do is call the Border Patrol or the Sheriff's Department. That's it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Sheriff's Department. And one lady back there was asking, why do we need the wall if the Sheriff's Department's doing such a good job? Keep in mind that Cochise County's over, how many miles? Cochise County?
300.
Okay, so that is just a little piece of this 2,000-mile border. Other areas along the border don't have the benefit of Governor Ducey, of Sheriff Daniels, of Brian McIntyre, of Tim and the Sabre team, of Mike and Jake. The New Mexico governor is never going to do that. The California governor is never going to do that. There could come a time when Arizona's governor wouldn't either. So, you know, those of us that have lived with this problem and fought for this problem for a number of years do want to see a fence, if you will, or a wall in places where it's necessary. There are places where it can't be done. There are places where it doesn't need to be done, but there's a lot of places where it does need to be done. In 2005, the Minutemen were on the border. Some of you remember that. And that was very carefully vetted. People were down by the border and they had binoculars and they had their cell phone and their lawn chair, and they would call Border Patrol and alert them when they saw groups coming. And it was a very effective time in stopping a lot of the illegal traffic on us. What that did was it rerouted them, so to speak. And so now the drug cartel learned that they could control the people coming across the border as well as the drugs. So they started controlling the people. And then later on, Davis Road, where I live, was less remote. There's more traffic. So the drug cartel moved over to the more rural places, more than we are, as a matter of fact. So it shut down a lot of the illegal traffic on my property, which helped us, but it didn't help people in the San Bernardino Valley, for example. There are hundreds of break-ins, even daily as we speak, over in that area. People ask me all the time, why do you keep talking about this when your ranch is relatively safe? And my answer is because this is my country. And this country is not secure. The sovereignty is in question. And if whoever asks me to talk, I'm happy to talk about it because I have seen the progression over the years. And I do, again, want to thank the sheriff for all his help in the state legislature, and thank goodness we live in Arizona. I think that was about it. A couple things I wanted to make sure. Okay, I've been to DC 12 times, coming up on 13. 9 times I've been invited to talk to the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and we do radio interviews, and we reach anywhere from 4 to 5 million people when we do that. I just want to say it's an honor to be able to do it, to help secure this border for national security. Thank you very much.
That was unbelievable.